Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
He is a dictator, isn't he? But I was very surprised that you called your 7 years with us 7 years of tribulation. Wow. He was one of our best students, though. It is not an easy journey. I have the privilege to be the director of the PhD program in leadership at Andrews University. I've been doing that for a few years now, but my background is I'm a pastor. I worked as a pastor, then came to the United States to study how we can be more effective in our community outreach. So I went to Fuller Seminary to study missions. I have a master's in missiology and a PhD in intercultural studies, or missiology. And from there, I was called to work in Russia. Now, you remember what happened in '89? You came home and you saw the TV and you saw people on top of the Berlin Wall and you said, what's going on? That's impossible, because they usually shoot them down. But nothing happened. And that night, actually, they pulled down the wall and something extraordinary happened. And I just that summer had done my research for my dissertation, and it had taken me to Berlin. I was interviewing the conference president about principles of church growth that were effective in one of his churches. Only one of the Berlin churches was actually growing. And I found out that he didn't know why the church was growing. He says, well, it's a nice spiritual pastor, and he does all kinds of things. But I couldn't explain to you why it's working in his church, because there are other pastors that seem to do the same thing, but I don't know what the difference is. And that taught me something very interesting, that just because something is working or not working, we don't necessarily know why. And that drove me into research, drove me on into eventually becoming a scholar to investigate those kinds of things. So here I am. I worked in Russia for 2 years. These were the most thrilling years of my life, because, you know, they came and they said, can you please help us to train pastors in 3 months? Well, they were running out of pastors, and there were all these evangelists. You know, the European pastors that would do an evangelistic campaign, 28 meetings, and they had all their sermons, and they had all the slides. This was before we had PowerPoint. They had slides, overhead slides, and so on. And nobody would come. They took those same slides and they went to Russia. And not only did they have one evening a night, they had to have 2, because so many people showed up. And churches sprung up everywhere, and after a while, we ran out of pastors. So they said, could you help us? Well, I had studied leadership, and I was doing some thinking about how to develop field-based programs so we can take people, put them into small groups. There they are leaders. They show that they have a calling to be effective. And then we would resource them, and then we wanted to multiply them, and then eventually say to Zaoksky, our seminary, they have been faithful in 2 years, and look, there's now not only 1 group, but 2 and 3 or 4 or 10 groups. This is pastor material. Now, give them something so that they can even become more effective. Can you see? We were doing developmental type of thinking, and it was exciting. Until the new division president came and he said, what you're doing is not Adventist. Because we have a structure. We have a seminary to teach pastors. And we have a lay department, and that's where we train lay people, and so on. And he says, what you're doing is you're taking lay people and you want to make them pastors. And I think that is not kosher. So they ordered me to the General Conference to give a presentation to explain what we were doing. And I was just what? A lowly pastor from Austria that had been recruited to help leadership development in Russia. And here I was for my first time And I came to the general conference. And you know, when you go into that building and you just used to normal houses, and you walk into that building, wow, this is interesting. Where am I? And then I was in the conference room, and there was the director for the youth, Israel later. And there was the director for religious liberty. It was Brother Beach. Wow, I had read articles about him. There he was. And so on, one after the other. They were all in the room. And I had to give a presentation. And when they were all done, when I was done, they looked at each other and they gave me a hand, and then they said, well, some good things actually come not from headquarters, but from the periphery. And it was a very encouraging meeting. But, they said, we're trying to build a new division in Russia. So eventually what happened was, what we were doing was merged with the seminary. And even the wife of the seminary president, she studied for her Doctor of Ministry dissertation, small groups, because that's what we were doing. And she was the first woman to get a Doctor of Ministry from the seminary. And she became the specialist. That was very interesting in the Euro-Asia division, and was working with people to develop small groups. But there was an interesting thing. When we were there, in the first year, the church was growing by 48%. Now, do you get what that is? You know, you have, let's say you have 10,000 members. How many members do you have the next year? Almost 15,000. Exactly. The next year, the church was growing by 22%. So if you have 15,000, how much do you have the next year? Okay, some of you are pretty good. So another 3,500. So now we're up to 18,000 something. The next year, it was going down again. And then the next year, stop. What happened? Why is it that you can baptize 48%, then 22%, then it gets less, and then it's 0? Now, I should tell you that a lot of the people that were baptized in Russia, why were they so eager to come to a church meeting? Yes?
Because Russia, under communism, or socialism, really wasn't into Christianity. It was outward.
You're right. And there were people that were waiting to be baptized for a whole generation. And we were the best thing in town to give them just that. And when they would be baptized, they were like the woman that had touched the hem of Jesus. And they were walking away in peace. And what were we doing? We let them walk out because we had no system to hold them in the church. Interesting. We lost a lot of them, and in fairness, we should say, the division then took them off the membership after a few years when they realized they were no longer coming. So it was a very responsible thing for the division to do, but that is the situation. In addition, the borders were open, and where were the Russians going? Where were the young entrepreneurial Russians, especially the Adventist generation that finally wanted to go to Newbold College or to Andrews University and so on? They came over here. Some of them are in your communities. And so the Russian church right now is growing by 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, no longer 48%. Why am I telling you this? What does that tell us? When we think about the receptivity of people, what have we just learned about receptivity in the community? Is that something that we can take for granted? No. There are moments when God stirs up things or uses things that have been stirred up, that make communities, that make groups of people receptive to the gospel. And what happens if you or I are there to talk to them, to become their friends? Can you see that there might be a bridge to the gospel, actually? But what happens if there is nobody there? This morning, I would like to talk to you about how to build these bridges. However, there is one problem. Chances are that the people that are receptive in your community don't look like you, don't speak the language that you have. They may be different from you. They may have a different culture. They may even have a different religion. And now, what do we do? I'll give you an example. In Austria, where I come from, after the war in 1947, there was a 13th Sabbath offering. Now, do you know what 13th Sabbath offerings are? We always have projects. One of the projects was to help the poor Adventist church in Vienna. Remember what Hitler had done? He had annexed Austria to Germany. And so Austria was implicated in all the war turmoil because it was now the German Empire. And so when the Allies came, Vienna was bombed just like the German cities. And finally, Vienna, Austria was divided into 4 sectors because the British, the French, the Russians from the east, and then finally the Americans came in. By the way, those who were in the American sector, they were the lucky ones. Because the American soldiers, they would watch the children that were hungry and so on, and they would say, "Come here." And then they would share their chocolate with them. And there's a generation like me in Austria that, and my parents, my mother and so on, that still remember the American soldiers. My wife's mother still has a little can with that an American soldier gave to her as she was peeping into the camp, hungry. It is a prized possession. A whole generation was shaped in terms of who Americans are. By the way, that's going away very, very rapidly around the world. It's no longer there. But my parents' generation, they saw Americans as their savior. The French, the English, they were fair. They didn't rape the women. I don't want to stereotype, because not every Russian soldier did that. But a lot of atrocities happened in the Russian sector. And so there was the 13th Sabbath School offering to build a church in Vienna. I went to that church. That was my first church that I pastored as an intern. It was a big church in the Nussdorfer Straße in Wien. Wien in the 9th district. It's right in the center. It's just walking away from where all the big buildings are in Vienna when you come there as a tourist. Would you believe they sold that building? There was the union office in there and so on. But it was a big expense, that building, and we didn't have enough room. With the price that they got for that building, they got a building that is 3 times as big, 10 times more functional, and they're very happy about it. And we got the right to keep the church in there, in the basement, with the big hall, with the columns and so on. Well, the new owner didn't do anything with the building, except he evacuated all the families. It's 7 stories, so most of it is just apartments. So he served notice. I want you out within so many months. And so suddenly, the whole building was vacant. Then came the Syrian refugee crisis. And guess what happened? They sold the building for good money, and a Russian investor bought the building. He went into each of those apartments, and he made each room self-contained. He put a lock on it, and then you have a shared bathroom and a shared kitchen, and now he can put into each of those rooms, he can sell that, so to speak, or rent that out as an apartment. And he collects the money that is paid by the United Nations for refugees. And instead of it being 50 apartments, now you have 150 refugee families with children in that building. So one Sabbath, now you come to church. And what do you see? What do you see? You see people. And what do they look like? Can you recognize when there is a Muslim family? Yes, you can. And so what did the members do? The members said, "Wow, this is fantastic. God is sending to us people that we wouldn't have been able to reach. Let's become friends." Is that what they said? What is reality?
They ran away. They were scared.
They were scared. And in the political climate in Europe, you know, in Germany you had in 2015 750,000 refugees asking for asylum. Do you know what that means? How many refugees came to, Syrian refugees came to America? You know what 750,000 is in a small country like, this is huge. And of course there's all kinds of politicians, and they know how to make heat. But we don't know either what to do with the people that God sends us, because they don't look like us. They don't believe what we are believing. They don't speak our language. What do we do? Now, that of course is Austria. That's not New York. That's not the community where you are, or is it? So, let's get started. Are you ready? The first thing that I would like you to do is to introduce yourself. But we'll do it with a little twist. I would like you to introduce yourself to a partner at your table, or if you're 3 people, you find a way to do it. 3 of you. If there's somebody lost, then please turn to make sure that everybody is included. We'll do the Navajo greeting. It's very simple. I am Eric Baumgartner from Andrews University, the son of Edith and Eric Baumgartner, and the grandson of Christine Seefried and Eduard Seefried on my mother's side, and of Maria Baumgartner, and I don't know, on my father's side. And the great grandson of, I don't know. I'm trying to make it easier for you because some of you are scratching their heads and they're saying, I know my grandfather over here and my grandmother over here, but I don't know my great-grandfather. Unless you come from Korea, and of course there you know it generations and generations. Okay, so go ahead, introduce yourself. I have it here for those of you who need a little. Well, I asked you about sharing who you are, and then some of you discovered also about what's the story of how your family got here, and you started doing that as well. Now, did you notice something? When you do a greeting like that, what does that help you remember? That you are here today. How did you get here? You know, there's a kind of you're linked to another generation that was linked to another generation that was linked to another generation, and you can just. I mean, this room here is, we could just visualize it, you know. I'm the son of my parents, my great-parents, my great-great-parents, my great-great, and then we have these ways of kind of tracking. And some of you actually have gone through the trouble to do formal research, and you were ready for this. Because you have your family tree right there on your computer. But some of you were scratching your head. You remember fractions, a name, and that was only the nickname. It wasn't even the real name. So on, and so on, and so on, and so on. But still, you are who you are. You actually got some things from your ancestors. Now the last question, and I do that sometimes, and I tell you it's very interesting. You can't stop people talking about it once they really get into their story. As a matter of fact, I'm just throwing this out. In urban settings, among well-educated urbanites, exploring who you are and your story may be a new type of evangelism. I'm just throwing this out because, think about it. Do you believe that God knew who you are when you were being formed in the womb of your mother? Yes, you do believe that? Well, then God is the author of your story. Right? And what he wants to do is he wants to co-author your story with you. Right? Why? God is writing a story. He made you unique. There is no one in this world like you. That means your story can tell the story of God in a way that nobody else can. Anyway, that was just a sideline. You know a little bit about that. He's in our leadership program, and so was Sang Kwan. And We do, when we start our leadership program, actually, that's one of the first things we do. We explore our stories. And some of them write and write and write. I just got, would you believe that? I got a document of 175 pages. Somebody wrote 175 pages about his life. He could not stop. Some of us have never really stopped thinking about the story of our life, or the stories of our life. And if we don't know the stories of our life, and if we don't stop and actually look into it, very often we miss, when we make decisions for our life, we miss the very thing that can give us direction. Because as you trace the fingerprints of God in your life, there is indications of where He wants you to go. But that's another story. So, now, what did you learn? What did you learn with what we just did? Okay, now here's what we will do. When I ask a question and you look at me like you do right now, I realize that you're a bit lost and you need some time to think. And so what I will do is, if I don't hear after 10 seconds that there is a response in the room, what I will do is turn to your partner and share one thing that you have learned. And then what we'll do afterwards, we will just hear very rapidly 2 or 3 things so that I know it has sunk in, some of the things that we're learning, and then we'll move on because we have a lot of territory to cover. But I really want to make it in a way so that you don't just listen to me without having a chance to reflect what's actually going on. Okay, so we'll do this as kind of to get started. What did the Navajo greeting process, what we just did, what did you learn from that? Turn to your partner and share one thing that you are learning or that you learned. Just a simple fact to introduce ourselves that way. Have you ever done this that way? No. So it's not a normal American thing. That's why it's called the Navajo greeting, because there are some places in the world where this would be very natural. Did you ever read that Jesus said, and when you are on the way, don't greet anybody? Well, Jesus doesn't want us to be friendly to people? Was that what he was saying? No, he was saying, don't stop on the way and exchange stories until you discover that common ancestor, which could take a few hours before you actually can pin it down. I'm sending you on an urgent mission, so don't stop for this kind of greeting where you are researching for the common ancestor, which is very often where this exercise would lead. But it also reminds us that there are different cultures that do things differently from us. How do we greet people? Hi. Now, when you come to Austria, this is what we do. Oh, we do that in the United States too. Ha! Tomorrow morning when I come in, guess what I will do? I will greet everybody again. And I do that every time I come into the room. I greet everybody by shaking hands. And for Americans, that gets old very, very quickly. You do that the first time you meet somebody, but that's it. Afterwards, hi. What's up? And why are there these differences? Well, Austrian culture is still a little bit more formal. You know, Austria was the Hungarian-Austrian Empire, owned sometimes Spain. When they sent somebody over here to discover America, that was the Habsburgs that actually also governed Austria. So what I'm trying to say is Austria has a very formal history, and so people are still very into formal things, more communal. While you here, you are a little bit more individualist. And yeah, we do the friendly thing one time, but then don't bother me anymore. It's my space, okay? I'm here to learn, not to waste my time, etc. Now, where do we go from here now? So, go to your notebook and just pull it out. There is on page number 1, one of the cross-cultural ministry part. There's a table of contents. You notice what we'll do today? So what we just did is, what does it mean to be human? We come from somewhere, but we will go more into this a little bit in a moment. And then the second thing we will do is, how have our roots, so to speak, shaped who we are? And that's where we get into culture. And you will notice that culture is basically that first part, the hidden dimension, on stage culture, the culture onion, and then what is culture? There are more definitions, and then implications for ministry. And then, of course, the big question is, how do we deal with cultural differences? And there are some worksheets there that you can do on your own. We won't do them all in here. But then the second part, we have to talk about, okay, so how do we understand people from other cultures, and how can we be understood? And we will notice that just meaning well and being who you are is not enough in cross-cultural ministry. That still will get you in trouble. When you deal with other people, how many of you currently are dealing with people groups from other cultures in your Adventist community services? Okay, quite a few of you have to do with people that are from different places. And some of you, even if you don't currently deal with it, you have memories what happened when you were dealing with people from other cultures. Some of you have memories that are not the best. What happened when you visited another country and you got into a situation? It's not always easy. So how do we communicate with others? Communication is a big thing. And then we will talk about, all right, so there is something about culture that is very interesting. Namely, culture shapes us in ways that we are not aware of. Dare I say? How many in this room are biased? Some of you feel uncomfortable about the question. How many of you are racist? Okay, you're not ready for that yet. It's okay.
I'm prejudiced, not racist.
No, racist, that's always the other ones. It's not me. Bias, that's a word that maybe sometimes, but not intentional, right? I would not be. Well, we'll discuss it a little bit. There's an interesting way culture does to us things that we are not aware of. That's what is this surprising spell of culture. And we will talk about differences. You know, there's all these culture dimensions. And then, how do we work with some of these things in practical ways in our community services? So that's what we want to do. Is that okay with you? Now, that's more than we can handle in 6 hours. That's kind of compressing a whole semester into 6 hours. But there's all kinds of resources available, including this whole course is available almost on video and so on in more detail, because community services has been very diligent in making different things available to you. So for instance, this whole syllabus was created in order to give you more material than we can actually cover during our time together. So, why do we need cultural competence? Well, let me just give you a few facts. There is, of course, the fact that America is changing. We have now more babies of color in a given year than white culture babies. That trend shifted in 2013. So even though the whites are still the majority, the number of babies that are born there are more babies now of color, of different ethnic groups and racial groups, etc., than white babies. Now you already know where we're going with that. That, of course, means that America is moving. Another trend is that in school, minority student enrollment surpassed white student enrollment 2 years ago. And this keeps on going. The majority of children in the US will be part of a minority race or ethnic group. So we have the interesting thing that the majority will be from the minorities in the United States. There will be eventually no more majority of any group in this country. And of course there are groups that want to change that, want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that creates all kind of ferment even in our nation today. And sometimes it happens when it happens out into your face, that's something new, you think. Well, it is not that new for many of you, because you have been, so to speak, affected by that all your lives. Me coming from Austria, I have to tell you, when Black History Month come around, I could not understand what that was about. And you know what I would think in my mind? Will you forgive me for being honest with you? Why do these blacks always have to talk about slavery? That's what I was thinking. Now, where I'm from is Austria. Do you know when I saw a black person for the first time face to face? Well, when I was 17. I grew up. Now, we had Yugoslavs. We called them Jusian. We had Turks. We had other ethnic groups, but they were guest workers. And by definition, they were just here temporarily, until we found out that it was not temporary, because they told their wives and their kids to come. And now they're in Austria. And it's very hard for some Austrians to see that, because the very things that we have built with our own hands, they are living in there now. And look, they are not taking care of it the way I think it should be taken care of. So when I came to the United States, I was really in good shape. I had no prejudice against blacks because I thought they were just interesting. For me, a black person was an interesting curiosity. And then, after 1 year of living with Dr. Augsburger in his basement, he said to me, Eric, I've given you 1 free year, that was the agreement. I will need that room in the summer. So I moved. The only place that I could find was a room in a 4-bedroom apartment. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, and there was a kitchen, there was a bathroom for us. And there was Joel Mushoshi, and there was Zebron Mube, and there was another gentleman that I don't know the name. I know he was African and he was into labor unions, and he was bent on teaching the Adventist Church a lesson in Africa, where he came from. I don't know where he came from. I think he was from Zimbabwe. And he would come to breakfast in his underwear. And you know what? He would sing when he would come into the kitchen. And he would dance. And he was making something for breakfast, for Pete's sake, that was smelling. You know, you eat oatmeal in the morning. You eat toast in the morning with jam. You don't make noodles or rice or whatever it was and make the whole place smell. Of course, I didn't know I was racist even then, because look what he's doing. It was only later that I realized that I was racist with every fiber of my being. And then I came to Andrews as a professional. And I still couldn't understand, why do they always have to talk about slavery? And then one day, I said to my wife, I want to watch that movie. I forget which one it was because I've watched so many now. The Color Purple or something like that. And I said, what? And that was when I was already alive. That was not centuries ago. And then one day, one of my colleagues said, yesterday, at such and such a crossing, I was stopped. And then he just detailed the process of what he had to go through. And he was stopped because he was black. And I said, well, you know, it's always the first reaction. Well,
What's the big deal?
wow. Can that truly be? So I asked him, he says, has that happened to you before? And wow, that was just, how much time do you have? One story after another, after another, after another, after another. I saw a video at the Lake Union in Berrien Springs just a couple months ago from the secretary of this division, what happened to his son. Some of you have seen it. Well, I repent. So here I am. I'm teaching you something about other cultures, but and I'm a white person, and probably my racism will come through here and there. But are you willing to hang in with me? Because up until a few years ago, I always even had to avoid the word. I was so not racist. I could not even say the word. until my brothers, my black brothers, taught me that that's the first thing they sometimes realize they are experiencing again. And therefore we need to talk about it. But I should say, this is not a class about diversity. Diversity only by implication. It is about how to bridge cultures. Okay? So we will touch on some of these things, but we will not really go there. Okay? But I wanted you to be aware that you're dealing with a fallible human being here that will try to get us going, get us thinking and so on, but we will go somewhere else in this particular session. So, one thing that I really want to highlight right now has to do with sorry, I thought I had it up. I want to show you something. I truly believe that God is doing something in the world that is extraordinary and that should help us understand why Adventist community services are actually so important today. I want to talk to you for a moment about 2016 and what happened in the world. 10.3 million people in 2016 have been forced out of their home through war, through persecution, through hurricanes, floods, etc., etc., etc. 10.3 million. How many people live in New York City?
8.5, 9 million.
9 million? More than the people in New York with all its feeder systems, so to speak, have been displaced in 1 year alone. Now, I will go rapidly through some of these. 2 million new claims of people that are fleeing because they're being persecuted or they're in a war situation. And Germany itself has claimed 722 of such claims processed them for the United Nations. You can only imagine what that massive movement of people means. What that means is that right now, every minute that we speak, 20 new people are being displaced, ripped out of their home just now. Now, we're not talking now just about the hurricane and what happened in Puerto Rico or what happened in Mexico City. That's on top of that, okay? Do you know what that is? Backpacks. Backpacks of whom? Maybe children, maybe other people. These are the backpacks that are washed ashore of the people that have drowned on their perilous journey across the Mediterranean. This is from Lesbos. In 2016, we had 65 million people that had been forcibly displaced worldwide that are basically living in refugee camps in different situations all over the world. That includes 5.3 million Palestinians. That includes the 2.8 million asylum seekers that are in process right now, and so on. That also has quite a few people that are being displaced in their own country. South Sudan, unfortunately, is one of the fastest growing refugee problems. 1.8 million, and you can see where they have to go. Kenya, Uganda, 640,000, Ethiopia, 338,000, Sudan, some people that are Muslims, they try to escape the violence, going back up. And then you have the Central African Republic, which is a bad deal for most people because it's a very poor country and there's a lot of refugees that are actually coming from there. But even that is better than to stay because they are just not safe. You have all heard of the girls that were in Cameroon, or in Nigeria by Boko Haram and so on. This is one of the girls. Here are the facts. Most of those refugees, of the new refugees in 2016, come from 3 countries: Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan. Where do they go? There are 2.9 million people in Turkey that live in those camps and are being absorbed there. 2.9 million. Can you imagine the number? Pakistan, 1.4 million. Lebanon, 1 million. Lebanon has one of the highest density of refugees. It's a very small country. What state could we compare Lebanon to? Rhode Island? That's the size we are talking about. 1 million refugees on top of the already dense population. Then, of course, Iran, Uganda, you see why, and then Ethiopia. Syria. More than half of the Syrian population is now displaced in their own country, or displaced across borders. And there has been a relentless push of people trying to come over to Greece from Turkey until the European Union started paying Turkey to keep the people right then and there. It's a good deal for Turkey in terms of resources. They're really getting a lot of resources. But still, it is not a very easy thing. Now, what about the US? Last year, the US has admitted about 85,000 people. That was the last year of the Obama administration, and they had, in view of the need worldwide, they upped the upper limit to 110,000 for 2017. And so from the fiscal year starts, starts in October 1. So there has been an additional 30-some thousand since October 1 that has come to this country. Now, when we are talking about refugees, what are we talking about? Now, these are people that have nowhere to go. Their homes are destroyed, their country is often destroyed, and what happens to them? I want you to know that the United States has one of the most vigorous vetting processes. That process at least takes 2 years, at least. Has 7 agencies, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, etc., that are working with them. First, they have to apply for asylum. Then they have to fill out a lot of paper stuff. If they don't have any documents, they cannot go anywhere. They will never be admitted to the United States. If they are forced, or if their home is burned down and all their documents are burned, you will never see them in the United States. Period. Doesn't matter how bad their situation is. We have families here in the United States where a boy was forced to become a soldier, one of those child soldiers in Somalia, for instance. The family is here, the boy is over there because the United States will not admit it. then once they have done everything that needs to be done, then they are cleared in terms of their health. All the databases are being researched. Once they are cleared with that, then they go through 3 separate screening processes that are much, much more in depth than any tourist that comes to the United States. So, to say that we don't have a good process for vetting refugees, it doesn't matter on which side you are. That is a shame-faced lie. Okay? And nobody working for Adventist Community Services can afford not knowing that. Okay? You need to be educators in our communities, because the fears of our people are just as real as the fear of the American population. That one day there will be this somebody that will come and do things and so on. And just because that happens doesn't mean that the process is not as good as it can get. All right? In the meantime, am I preaching? I probably should slow down. Okay. The Trump administration has now set a goal of 50,000 a year. This includes all refugees that the United States is taking in. Can you see it's just a drop in an ocean of need? And these are people that have lost everything all day, and they don't necessarily want to come here, by the way. Okay? Now, America has always had problems with immigrants. When the Hungarian crisis came, look at how many people disapproved of taking Hungarians in. They were running for their lives because the panzer from Russia was mowing down their cities and their towns. When the Indo-Chinese crisis was that Vietnam? I forget now. I cannot tell you. 62% against people coming in. Cuban crisis, 71% of Americans disapproved for Cubans to be taken in. When the ethnic Albanians, remember the Kosovo War? That was one where the public was so prepared by the media, they realized we need to do something. So America was a little bit more open. Where do they go? Well, they are spread out all over the place. California, Texas, New York, Michigan, my own state. This year already has a few more. Do you know what this is? Can you see that? It's not just a pretty blue picture. This is a boat, and every inch of this boat is taken by a human being. And what happens to these boats? Well, when you have sun and the ocean is quiet, it is a nice, wonderful, leisurely walk. But how often is the ocean that way, the Mediterranean? And so they end up in the water, and many of them die. 23,000 have died in the last few years trying to escape from wherever they come from. All right, I won't go into all the details, but the highest number of refugees come in 2016 from the Congo, then from Syria, then from Burma, and now we have this big crisis in Burma again, then Iraq, then Somali. So this always shifts, okay? Now, interestingly, in 2016, the US has admitted its highest number of Muslim refugees on record. That's an interesting little fact. Notice how big, because there's just so many of them. But Trump has already said he will give priority to Christians. And now one more thing. I just need to share that with you. Because when people are under attack, of course, there's many adults that die. Many of the people that are refugees are, in some places, it's over half of the children of the refugees are children. And so here's a picture drawn by one of the refugee children to symbolize that they have been separated from their parents. 75,000 unaccompanied or separated children. Okay, and here's an important thing for you to realize. The American agencies that work together with the United Nations, they have set up programs where when you have refugee children, you cannot adopt them. That's legally impossible. In other words, that would take advantage of them. However, you have in some of your churches people that are already foster parents. You have in your churches sometimes couples that are longing to have children but can't for whatever reason. They will travel the world. They will literally pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, $10,000s of dollars, to bring one child from China over here or from wherever it is. Do you realize that the UN is hoping for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more of those homes right here and now? And you can have these foster children and you basically have them for life. And the government pays for that. So that's something that I'm sure you're talking about in some of your courses. But the big question that we need to ask ourselves, okay, so a refugee family arrives and your Adventist Community Center has gotten in touch with the nearest agency that actually processes these immigrants, this repatriation and so on. And you become aware that they are actually looking for communities, for churches to welcome and to mentor some of these families. Can you imagine yourself in that situation now? Okay, one day you get a phone call from the agency. It says, okay, the family that has been assigned to you is in the airplane. They will be arriving tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Are you with me? All right. What is it that they will need? What's their greatest need? What is their immediate need? What will you do? Turn to your neighbor and explore a little bit and come up at least with 3 things that a family like this family that is arriving on American soil tomorrow will need. All right. I'd like to hear just spontaneously shout out some things that they will need.
Housing.
They need a lot of love.
A lot of love. Okay. Clothes, right?
Housing first.
Housing. Okay. I heard clothes. Toiletries. Okay. Support groups, yes? Food, etc., etc. Now, healthcare. Now, a lot of the things that you have just talked about, they are already taken care of. Why? Because the agency that brings them in is responsible for organizing all this. Okay? So, food, where they will stay, all this is organized. Is that good news? Yes. Okay, now, for a moment, can you put yourself into the shoes of this refugee family that is arriving? Okay? You're in the airplane. And here's the husband, and here's the wife. And now we are listening in what they are talking about. What do you think they are concerned about? Their children?
I say acceptance.
Acceptance. As a matter of fact, have you ever traveled overseas in an airplane?
Yes.
Why did you go to another country?
Curiosity.
Curiosity. Have you ever been invited to go to another country?
Yes.
Like, I've been invited to do a seminar in Tanzania. What do you think I'm worried about?
Are you going to fit in?
Hmm?
Are you going to fit in?
Safety.
Maybe. But think with me, I will arrive.
Safety.
Who's going to meet you?
Who?
What does the person look like?
What did you say?
Who's going to meet me?
Will there be somebody there? You need to think very slowly and normal. Just don't think in the clouds. Will there be somebody there? Now, you have been called by the agency. They will come. So what are you doing? What will you do as a community service center? You know what you need to do? You need to have your network ready. And now comes the phone chain. You rally together as many people as possible to give them a welcome party. You want to let them know that they are coming and they are wanted. And you bring the balloons, and you bring a little gift for each of the children and for the mother and for the father. You let them know we're here. Welcome to America. Can you see why? What is the greatest need that these refugees have? Now, somebody said love. But research shows that loneliness is one of the greatest needs of the refugees. Why?
Because people may not speak the language and they will not may not be able to communicate with them effectively because of language and cultural differences.
That's right. But when you meet them for the first time and you welcome them, there is a universal language, so to speak. So the small gifts, it doesn't have to be big, just something for everyone. And your love expressed, and remember, do they come from an individualistic society or from a community-oriented society? Community-oriented society. Even if most of the people that come to the airport will have no part in actually taking care of the family, this is the time where you want to rally a big group. Why?
Support.
You want to show them, we are a community. You are home now. Now, this is just the first step. By the way, this is not evangelism, okay? This is just normal human touch. You are a Christian, that will come through. By the way, I heard it from the mouth of a person that works with displaced families. You know what they said? Research shows that the difference between a refugee family that thrives and a refugee family where they want to go home, they're so lonely that they cannot make it here in the United States. Or you say, but this is heaven here in the United States. There is nothing more hell than being alone in the United States. The United States is a very threatening country for someone that is not used to our individualism. They depend on the community. And therefore, what they said is, the research shows that what makes the difference in thriving refugee families is a church. I will leave it up to Pastor Kwan to give you the theology that shows that all throughout the history of the Bible, the people of God has been an immigrant family. Jesus himself has been a refugee. He was dependent on the good graces of his hosts. And God provided gifts in advance. You remember that? In order to make sure he could survive. So now, having said all this, what is the second most important need? It has to do something with how do I understand the United States? It's cultural orientation. It is cross-cultural bonding. And that is where this course comes in. And that's why I want to take you through a little process now to help you understand the people that you're working with. Okay? So go to your notebook to page 3. And there you have a kind of a thing like this. And here's what I would like you to do in this circle diagram. The instructions are right there. Each of these little squares are a place to say something about yourself. Who am I? Well, I'm a male, I'm a white male, I'm a white European male if you want to. I could put that into one of the squares, but I'm much more than that, right? I'm also a father. So you decide what you want to put into these squares. You can make more squares if you want to, or you don't have to use all the squares. Just go to work. I will give you 3 minutes to fill out those squares. Remember that Syrian family? When we talk about them, how do we talk about them? They are the refugees, or they are the Syrians. That's the only square that we use to describe them. Have you ever been in a situation where you were the only American and somebody referred to you, our American sister, or our American brother, and so on? And that's all they know, and suddenly you realize that's not only a compliment, that is kind of a label that defines who you are. Lock, stock, and barrel. That's all they know about you.
And it's not always a compliment. It's not always a compliment.
It's not always a compliment either. Sometimes it's to kind of point a finger at it. What happens to a person when we reduce him or her to just one category, one label? Can you see that we are much more complex than any one of those labels? Even when we say child of God. Amen. That is only a label for a reality that is much greater. Or when we say mother. Now I need to hear your story. What do you mean? The moment you give me a label like that, now there's a point to explore, because there might be some very rich things to explore. How many children have you had? Who are they? Where are they? Etc., etc. And then as you get to know them, especially from mother to mother, to share aspirations, heartaches that come with being a mother. Now, every human being, even when they speak a different language, even when they have a different color of their skin, are a complex human being with multiple dimensions. So, one thing that we need to realize is that when people limit us to one of their labels, they are not seeing the whole reality. But here's where we come to grips with culture. There's all these hidden dimensions, even as we approach people as personalities, as persons. But there is an even larger dimension that we call culture. Just as you are who you are because of the generations that went on before you, they have not only given you your personality, they have not only given you your personal history, etc., etc. They have also given you dimensions that are broader than that, much more deep, and they have shaped you in ways that we are not aware of. And that is why it is often called the hidden dimension. Go to page 5 now. Let's illustrate that for a moment. Cultures have visible aspects and invisible aspects. So we are illustrating that by the iceberg model. And what we are doing is we are looking at the iceberg that is above the waterline and then the iceberg that is below the waterline. And the distinction that we're making is one is visible, the other one is not visible. It's below the waterline. For above the waterline, you will give an A to the list items. For below the waterline, you will give a B. Just go ahead and do that right now. I give you one example. Worship method. Is that A or B? A. Why is it A? Because you can see it, right? You can hear it. You can experience it. All right, good. So go ahead and do that with the whole list, and then we'll talk briefly about it. What is one of the most contentious points in countries that take in refugees that are Muslims about women? It is clothes. And why is it so important to the women to hold on to their burqa?
It's an identity for them.
Identity. Is there anybody here this morning that gave any thought to how you will dress? So it is visible, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Now, I put some thought in. I had 2 outfits with me. I had a shirt from another culture, or this. I had to make a decision. One of the reasons why I dressed the way I did is, you know, see, the teacher needs to be the best dressed person in the room, right? No, you are laughing, but you know it's true. And I knew I would be in a culture of people that pay attention to that. So I couldn't just come in blue jeans. If I would have come in blue jeans, it would have taken a while until you accept me and feel comfortable with me, but some of you would never accept me. Why? Because you have a system that is deeply ingrained in you that you are not even aware of, that is constantly judging the other person. And so clothes can become... That's why there are wars going on in some families about the clothes that the daughter wears or the son wears, etc., etc. How can you... You see? But it's interesting. It's visible, A, above the surface, but there is a part that even with clothes, there's the iceberg. So there is no right or wrong answer. This was just an exercise to get you going. Because, see, one of the learning principles is, if you ever have to teach, Don't hesitate to ask people questions about things that they don't know. Get their thinking going first. Research shows that you will increase their learning by a factor of 10. Just the fact that they're thinking about it, even if they don't know the answer, will help them to remember what you're doing in the classroom. So part of what we're doing here is to really prime the system, to help you to wrestle with something, even when we will talk about it later. I apologize for what happened on page number 5 on the bottom, because I want to talk a little bit about onstage and backstage culture. See, what we're talking about is that culture is complex. It has visible elements, and then there's things under the surface that we don't see, and in some cases, we don't even are aware of it. Now, I know that you are a person, you're so aware of yourself that you can hardly believe that there's any part of your life that you might not be aware of. And that's okay. That's okay. You're very confident in yourself, and I'm glad that you're here. And don't let me mess you up, okay? This morning. Just hold on to yourself. But let's talk a little bit about another metaphor, how we can understand culture. And what we're doing is we're trying to talk about something that is very real, but we have to find different perspectives to get at it because it's intangible. But just because it's intangible doesn't mean that it's not very powerful. The example that we just had is extremely powerful. The question if Muslim women should have the right to cover themselves. And by the way, if this is a refugee family and you want to minister to them, you know what a good woman is? A good woman is the one that is covered. And it is measured by inches, literally. How much skin do you show? If you are moral or an immoral person is judged by that. So if you come, even if you come in a shirt, in a skirt that goes beyond your knees, they will still view you as a typical Christian. It is better for when you meet Muslims to wear slacks, to have your long sleeves, and to be covered. You don't have to necessarily do the head covering and so on. Oh, but they have to get used to us. They are coming into our country. Yes. And some Christians go so far as to hand them a ham sandwich. If they get hungry enough, they will eat it. But that's where the catch is, because every Adventist in this room knows what that does to us. That's where you can identify with them. You know how it feels like when people want to push you into something that you feel inside is wrong. Okay, so get on with the program. If you want to minister to Muslim women, don't give them a ham sandwich by dressing in a way that makes you look like a prostitute, or that makes you look like you are an immoral woman. Now, I hope I'm not too hard on you. Please forgive me, okay? I have been a little strong, but I'm surprised at how unaware I am, you know, of all those little signals that I'm giving, or that we are giving, without even being aware of it. And in cross-cultural ministry, meaning well is not enough. They will still see you unconsciously through the filter of their culture. They don't have anything else, just like you see them through your filter. Okay? And so that's why we have to wrestle with this. And now let's talk about stage. Culture is a stage. Some things happen in the front, on stage. Something happen backstage. All right? Now come with me to a classroom. You are a teacher. And the principal brings to you a new student. He's from Vietnam. Guess what his name is? His name is Ha. When the principal says, we have a new student, his name is Ha. Guess what happens in the room? There's laughing and snickering going on and so on. And this student immediately knows what he has to do. The next day he comes and he announces to the teacher that his name is John. All right. But now back to the first day. He wears his clothes that he came with his family, and his mom gave him a little knapsack with some Vietnamese food. Now, you have to understand that a lot of these ethnic foods, that once you open it, what happens? It smells. So he opens his, when there's the break, he opens his lunch, and guess what the children around him are curious about? Oh, what's that? And then what do some children say? Yuck. Well, it smells. But Ha is very perceptive. He watches the children and he notices that they're all going over to that place that has this big golden arches there. So he goes home and he says to his mom, "Can I have $1? Why do you need $1? You know, that's a lot of money. But that's where the children buy their food. I want to eat their food." And so on. So now you are the teacher. 2 weeks passed, and you are coming together with your other teachers, and you're giving a report. One of your colleagues asks you, "Well, how's it going with John?" "Oh, he's doing so well. He already got blue jeans, and he would you believe that he now also eats a hamburger just like the other children?" And yeah, he changed his name to John. And you rattle off all the things that have happened in those 2 weeks. Stop. Take a step back with me. Okay, you're no longer the teacher. You're now looking at the behavior, at the story that the teacher just told everybody in the room. Okay? Analyze with me. Think about what happened. What was the teacher trying to communicate to his colleagues? Pardon?
There's been a transformation in John.
Transformation, yes.
He was becoming like the other children.
That's right. He was. And how do we call that when somebody becomes like the others? Who said that?
Assimilation.
Assimilation, yes. He's on his way to become a little American, right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
We see it as a good thing. We see it as a good thing, most of the times.
Okay. What's really happening?
You took away from who you.
Could it be that that teacher is seeing some things that are not there? No, she sees some things that are there, visible, right? Clothes, food, name, etc. But what's going on with John? When John comes home, do you think that they are eating hamburgers for supper?
The conflict.
Do you think that he can be disrespectful of his parents and ask questions because the teacher constantly says, if you don't know, just ask? But Johnny has been very hesitant to actually do that, even in class, because there's something in him that tells him the teacher is the authority. You don't question your teacher. You listen to your teacher. That has been put into the mind of these children until they understood. Because if they didn't, what happens? There are consequences, that's right. So now he is in a classroom. The teacher says, well, some teachers even go so far that they give grades based on participation. And participation, by definition, means to ask questions and to answer questions. Right? So, help me now. In 2 weeks, some visible changes. How long do you think until Johnny, for the first time, will ask a question in class? It may take a long time. Why do you think it takes so long to ask a question of the teacher in public, but it takes only very little to change your name? What's the difference? Pardon?
He doesn't want to be made fun of.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Peer pressure. Can you explain what you mean?
You want to fit in, every child and or adult, because we all still do it, something that comes with us and within us, and we grow up with feeling that if we don't belong, we're not part of. It's a system, it's a culture, it's family, friends, or whatever it may be. So you always want to see what the other person is doing, and you may even copy it at one time. So a child is the same thing.
That's right. And so as he is watching in the classroom, he is beginning to absorb the reality that when the other children ask a question, what happens? They get rewarded. The teacher actually answers the question. There was a Russian child. She did very well. Same thing, clothes, even names, so on. Her name was Irina. Nobody could say Irina, so it was Irene, and she accepted that. She was Irene. As a matter of fact, she told everybody she was Ira. And because there is no equivalent, children started to call her Ira. One day, and she was doing very well. She knew no English when she came, but after a few weeks, she picked up some words and so on. And when the parents came to the teacher said, she's doing splendid. Don't worry about her. 3 months later, a letter comes home. Would you please talk to Ira? She is not following instructions. I cannot get her to do what she needs to do. I don't know what's happening. What happened? What happened in the mind of that? Now, can you see on-stage culture? What you can see. That's the name, that's the clothes, that is some visible behaviors. But there is backstage culture. The reasons for what you do, the reasons for the clothes you wear, and so on, you don't necessarily see. So the reason why Ha is not asking any question is because he's unsure about it, clashes with his system. His backstage culture is different from the backstage culture, and it takes him a while to realize what is actually going on in the classroom, and that if you ask a question, it's okay. even though it goes against what he has been taught at home. And when he tells the story that he asked his teacher a question, what happened? Nothing. The teacher was very happy. And now the parents are puzzled. But now let's go back to Ira. When the parents talked to Ira, you know what the answer of Ira was? But she is smiling. What? You understand what she's saying? Can somebody explain to me what this Russian child was experiencing? Pardon? What? Okay, come with me to Russia. How does a Russian teacher, any Russians here? They could maybe explain that to us? If there was a Russian teacher here, they would be easily able to explain to us. In Russia, the teacher is the authority in the room. A teacher makes sure when he or she gives instructions that it is done in a way that cannot be misunderstood. So you don't smile. When you smile, it becomes optional. You're having fun. When you are serious as a teacher, everybody in the room knows, okay, I have to do that. So Ira had been in the Russian school system. She knew how a teacher is supposed to act. So in the beginning, when she didn't understand anything, it was clear that she couldn't follow instructions. But after a while, the teacher realized that that was not the problem, that she didn't understand. She did understand, but she still didn't follow instruction. There's something wrong here. And it was only when the parents talked with the daughter, and the daughter said, but she is smiling, that something began to sink in. And it was this. In the child's mind, you don't have to follow instructions if the teacher smiles. It's kind of like the teacher would prefer that you do it this way, but it's okay if you do it this way. No, 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 no. The mother had to say, when the teacher says something, it doesn't matter what the teacher smiles or doesn't smile and so on. And from then on, no more problems. Can you see the strength of back culture? What changes easier, the front, the on-stage culture, or the backstage culture? On-stage is easy to change. Backstage, you may not even be aware, like this girl, but she is smiling. You may not be aware why you are doing it. It was lucky that this child could even formulate why she was doing what she was doing. She wasn't trying to misbehave. I'll give you another example. A teacher. Two teachers. They're working on the Navajo reservation. Missionary teachers. Are they dedicated? Yes. You bet they are. And this lady says to her colleague, I don't know. I'm teaching my heart out, but I'm not getting through. What do you mean you're not getting through? The students love you, says the other colleague. No, you don't understand. When I talk to them, there's something. They don't look at me. They look away from me. They're so dishonest. She described it as shifty-eyed and all kinds of things. She says, there will never be anything good out that will come out of these children. Ha, said the colleague. What did the colleague say?
It's a part of their culture.
Huh?
It's a part of their culture not to look directly into your eyes
Why?
Speak to them.
Disrespect.
Disrespect. It shows disrespect.
Ah, it is not respectful to look into the eye of a person in authority. You don't even look at into the eyes of your parents when they are angry with you. You show deference by looking away. These children, they were doing it because they did respect the teacher, but it was misunderstood by the teacher himself, herself. So, culture can get you in trouble when you don't know how the culture works of the people that you're working in. Go to page 7 now. And can you see now why culture has been called the hidden dimension? There is a lot of things that are going on in culture. And what we have said is that, just like the clothes, that's the what of culture. But the why of culture is part of the backstage. The teacher smiling, that's a behavior that we can see. Why the teacher is smiling? Well, why do you think an American teacher smiles at students? She wants to be in relationship with. It's a way of relating to the kids that has nothing to do with the authority of the teacher. But in other cultures, smiling has a different thing. It's very interesting. I went to Russia and I was asked to preach. That was the hardest sermon I ever preached in my life. You know what happened? They introduced me to the congregation, and then they were like some of you. They were looking at me with a stone-faced face. So I tried to connect with them, and the effect was zero. Now, some of you are at least smiling at me, so I'm feeling relatively at home here. And I could even use some ways that preachers do it so to get you all on board. Are you with me? And so, but that did not work in Russia. And so after I was done, I went to my translator and I said, I had a hard time this morning. Why? They really liked your sermon. Well, I didn't see that. What do you mean? They didn't smile. Oh, he said, Russians smile at friends, never at strangers. They don't know you, they don't smile at you. It's normal. Watch what will happen in the afternoon. So there we were. We went for the second instruction in the afternoon in a different building. And sure enough, as people were coming in, they were making eye contact with me. They were seeking my eye contact, and they were smiling at me all the time. And I said, now I'm at home. Okay? So, let's go to take a look at the onion of culture. Oh, I need to show you this before we go to the onion. Do you know what this is? Oh yeah, something with powdered sugar on it. So what is it? Donut? Pastry? How come you're so unsure?
It could be bread, just bread.
Maybe it's just bread, that's right. Maybe it's sweet bread. So, can you see, when you see the outside of something, yeah, you see the outer layer, and you're trying to guess what is inside. You don't know for sure. What it actually is, it's a strudel. Do you know what a strudel is? Well, let me invite you to Austrian pastry. All right, here it is. Now, I don't know if you can see it. This is a dough, and what's that on top here? It's black. Seeds, what seeds? Poppy seeds, that's right. Ground poppy seeds. We are making a poppy seed strudel. It's one of my favorites. My mother makes it, and I'm sorry that she is over 90 years old and no longer makes me poppy seed strudel. Okay? So there you are. So you have this structure of the dough, and then here's how you put it together. You usually that needs to be on a sheet, and then you can put apples in there, for instance. There it is. See? And then you roll it, and that gives you your famous Apfelstrudel. Can you see it? And so what gives the strudel its famous taste is right in here. It's not the dough, although the dough plays a big role, and you can see this one is very thin. The other one was more thick. Okay, and there you have it. And there you have the wonderful things. This is a berry strudel. This is an Apfelstrudel. This is the poppy seed strudel. This one, can you see how beautiful that is? And this is nuts. I grew up with that, and I miss it. That's one of the things I really miss. All right. I had to teach my wife. They don't have that in France. I had to teach my wife. Yes, yes. Okay, now, see, culture is a multi-layered reality. Okay? So there is a visible outside. There's the behaviors. You see what people do, what people wear, the products, the artifacts. But interestingly, also the institutions. And some people, they say, institutions, what do you mean? Well, when you came to the airport, if you immigrated to the United States, what was the first thing you had to do? You had to go through customs, through passport control. And how did those people look like at you?
No smile. They weren't smiling.
They were not smiling. They have their own culture, by the way, because Americans typically, they smile at people. Not so custom. They know that what they have to project is strength. No nonsense. Now you go to some other cultures. I was in Moscow. And right outside the airport, and we had to stop. I watched my driver take out his papers, had it all ready, a whole pack of it, and his driver's license, and he handed it to the police. Later he explained to me that this policeman has not been paid for the last half year. What they're looking for is for some money. So they will find any way of giving you a fine. In his case, they didn't find anything because even though it was a German VW van, all the papers were in order. The car had been entered into Russia in the right way, had the right stamp, had the right this, had the right that. He still found something. And so he had to pay. And it was a game that was going on. He knew, the police knew what was going on. Now what does that sound like to American ears? And it can get you in trouble because if you're an American official coming and your government will not allow you to bribe, now what will you do? This can be a standoff. Can you see that? But there's other cultures that see some of these realities through different lenses. And once you have a different lens, it's interesting, suddenly what was wrong can become right. Ah, there you are again. I was fearful that when I learn about culture, they are twisting the truth. They want me to do something that is wrong. No, don't go so fast. Don't go so fast. Don't go so fast. What I'm trying to tell you is that what looks sometimes as if it is wrong may have other dimensions. So at least let it sink in that there are other ways of looking at it. You still can say that was wrong, that he actually had this bill right there in his papers. Oh, by the way, when you go to your passport office and you want that passport back overnight, what do? What makes it right to pay the extra?
Fee? When you need
Nothing. If you need it that bad, yes.
And what makes it right?
You're paying for a service.
You're paying for a service and you know what you are paying because it's officially posted. Everybody knows what the rules are. And by the way, these businesses, they can charge as much as the market will hold, they say, right? It can be an outrageous price, but if it is posted and if that's the service that you are asking for, so what if it costs you $250 to get it processed overnight? Okay? So there are certain aspects where we are okay with what we are doing, even if we're paying more than what other cultures pay in terms of bribe. You see what I'm saying? The visible behavior is attached to some rules. What you believe is okay and what is not okay. What is a value? If I want to have it fast, that's my value. You pay for it. Time is money. That is an American value. Okay? Feelings. But then on the inside, there is something that is even more important that we call worldview. What's worldview? I'm counting.
What is
Okay. Think about it for a moment. Let's go slow for a moment. Beliefs. We know what beliefs are. That's my thoughts, my ideas about what I think is true. Okay? Feelings have to do with my preferences. But I like it that way. Feelings. Values. What are we talking about? Give me a value that is an American value. Integrity. What else? Give me an Adventist value. Honesty. What else? See, we're talking about things that are important to me. Now I should hear more things. Service. The Sabbath is important to me. Yes. Health. What's the most important American value? Freedom. Freedom. See, I knew if I formulated that way, that would come out. Liberty. Freedom. Yes. Money, and so on. That's what we're talking about, values here. Okay? Now, what is worldview? Worldview is something that most of us have never really talked about or thought about. It sounds always so sophisticated when other people talk about it and confusing. So here it is. Worldview has to do with our assumptions about what is real. Now you look very skeptical at me. And it's okay. You should be skeptical. Worldview. How does reality work? What is real? We have not had a break. I need to give you a break. Okay. What we are trying to do here is talk about something that is very difficult to get your hands on. In the beginning, what we have to understand is that our own culture gives us a sense of what is normal. Okay? So when the child does not look into my eyes, everything in me tells me he's hiding something.
Yeah.
And this response is automatic. I know. How do I know he's hiding something? Well, all my life, that's how I have functioned. If somebody is hiding something, they are not looking me into the eye. Johnny, look at me. Did you take that? Yes. That's our way of helping our children be accountable for what they are doing. In other cultures, it doesn't work that way. And what we have a hard time sometimes understanding is that these differences are real. I hear sometimes people telling me, but underneath, all cultures are the same. Nothing could be further from the truth. Underneath, cultures are getting more and more different. Why is it that in an age where we are so enlightened, we are fighting wars over sometimes nothing? Anyway, cultures move outward. At the core, there is worldview that is, we are largely unaware of our own worldview. Let me give you an example of what I mean when I talk about assumptions, okay? How many of you this last year had a cold? Okay, come on. You had a cold? Hey, not everybody got a cold.
Not yet.
All right. I travel a lot, and occasionally I get a cold. Now, I haven't had a cold for almost 3 years, so I was saying to myself, hey, I'm getting healthier. And then I was in Vienna, and it had that heat wave, and I got a cold by sweating and not drinking enough. Now, what causes a cold?
A sudden change of temperature.
No.
What causes a cold? She's not sure. What causes a cold?
Contact with germs.
Contact with germs. Any other solution? What causes a cold?
Coughing.
Contact with others.
Contact. Be more specific.
Others who have a cold.
With others who have a cold. And what is it that gives you the cold? Who is the agent? Ah, you don't know what you're talking about. Let me explain to you how colds really work. See, you get a cold or you get sick because you walked by that tree without paying attention to the spirit. And the spirit is mad with you, so that's why you have a cold. I'm dead serious. Who is in the majority? The ones that believe that sickness is caused by germs, or the ones that believe that sickness is caused by spirits, by bad luck, by evil eye, and so on. Who is in the majority in the world? Why do you think the Adventist Church found it necessary to have a new 28th belief?
Because of the spiritual world and the worldview of other nations and cultures where they see that spiritualism is alive. We don't see it here much in the United States, but it's over there, it's alive. It's very well, I can catch a cold from a tree or a ghost or a spirit. When we sent missionaries to certain parts of Asia, they present them the spiritual world, the demons and all this, and they became not to believe in demons, and they start trying trash, and they trash their city. And when missionaries asked them why did they throw trash in this, well, there are no more demons. Before they threw the trash away, put it away because they thought there were demons in the trash. So cultural view or religious beliefs are different.
Very interesting what you're saying. Now, remember that we are children of the Enlightenment. What did Enlightenment do for us? Do you remember the wars between the church and the scientists? When Galileo said, we are not in the center of the universe. We actually are turning around our axis and we are turning around the sun, Copernicus. What did the church try to do with those scientists? That's right. It was dangerous to believe that way. Okay? So that it was a war on the worldview level. How does the world work? How does the spirit world work? Let's get down to the practical level. If I believe that sickness is caused by germs, that's one assumption. Have you ever seen germs? No. Okay. Just checking. Another viewpoint is that it is caused by demons or by evil eye. How many of you have ever encountered evil eye? I see only one hand. You mean I need to explain to you?
I know for me, I can say yes, I have encountered that because again, this is what my family would say. So again, coming from a Hispanic or Latino culture, they believe in mal de ojo, so evil eye. So if someone says to you, because I used to have really long, if someone would touch your hair, they would say to me, don't let anyone touch your hair, because you don't know what realistically they're saying, oh, you have beautiful hair. But in reality, they're be saying, you really have beautiful hair. I wish I had it. And your hair starts falling out. They gave you the evil eye. So these are things that you're brought up with, or it perceives to be a perception that it is that. So that's why I was asking, elaborate to a certain degree. Good.
You're doing the teaching for me. That's exactly what I'm trying to help you understand. Evil eye is a reality for people. It's usually connected to, do you know what a taboo is? A taboo is something that you don't do, or it might have consequences. And in most of the world, these consequences are linked to the spirit world that will be angry with you. You know? So if you don't do this or don't do that, something bad will happen to you. By the way, I just talked during the break with somebody. Even these kinds of beliefs have also entered into the belly of certain Christian movements. You said in the Latino culture, the Catholic culture. There's all kinds of things where the spirit world has been embraced by the Catholic. Now, you have to understand something. There's a difference between high culture and folk culture. High culture is what they teach at the university. So if you go to a Catholic university and you say, do these things exist? You say, well, we know people do them, but we don't believe in it. It's like when somebody says, oh, you Adventists, you are legalists. Why are we legalists? Oh, because you keep the Sabbath and this and that and that and so. No. You misunderstand. We don't keep the Sabbath in order to be saved, but because we love God. It's a consequence of our being saved. Oh, that's not how they do it over there, or how they talk. Are there legalists in the Adventist church?
Yes.
See, what we teach at the seminary is one level. What is actually acted out in the everyday life, even by a seminary teacher, is folk religion. He or she may have their own way of doing things. And the same thing is true for Catholicism. The same is true for Islam, etc. For all religions. You have the university religion, and then you have what's actually happening out there. And out there, it's the playground of the spiritual. And it can be linked to actual spirit beings, or it can be magical, where it's connected to forces. Forces are not personal, you see? So it's impersonal or it is personal. And so when people get sick, in the majority of the world, you get sick because something happened that disturbed the balance between the spirit world or the magical world, the forces. You are part of these forces. And so in order to get well again, what do? Well, if you believe that it's caused by a germ, we zap the germs, right? Or we do something to help the spirits to feel better again. Now, I'm using language because I want you to understand something. Spirits very often have human-like characteristics. They can get angry, they can get disturbed, and they have the power to make your life miserable. Okay? So if you're in Thailand, and you want to buy a property, every Thai knows that the world is owned by the spirits. They live in trees, on the hill, etc., etc., etc. So when you buy a property, who owns it before you do? The spirit. So this is tricky. So how can you take a piece of property from the spirit and build a house there? That might be upsetting to a spirit. Can you see that? So what do? You bring him a sacrifice. That's one way of doing it. Well, how to do it in Thailand?
I have no idea, but I'm thinking, do they have like the people who come on the priestess?
Oh, that's an interesting idea. You bring in professional spirit appeasers that might do that. And in some cultures, that's exactly what happens. You have to have somebody to come and appease the spirits and say, okay, we're just taking this part. And by the way, even in the American Indian traditions, the way they dealt with nature was very often to live in harmony, to apologize to the buffalo that we're for killing him or her, whatever it is, but you do that just for a specific purpose. If you were doing it for another purpose, in order to get as many hides as possible, that is grossly immoral. That's where the clash of worldviews come. It comes at the worldview level, okay? Now, going back now to the spirits. in Thailand, you built a spirit house. How does a spirit house look like?
Hopefully small, 'cause I'm
Well, if in your front yard you have a bird feeder, just imagine a very elaborate bird feeder, and it has to have the right roof, etc., etc. And then you can bring him some peace offerings, to make sure that he has enough water and something to eat, and so on and so on and so on. So now, you are laughing. Anybody here from Thailand that could explain to us that a little bit more? I had a friend. He was a Baptist minister. He is a well-known Baptist missionary. He has trained hundreds of people to go out as missionaries into the 1040 window. So when we had a mission institute in Thailand, in Bangkok, I went up to Chiang Mai to visit him. And lo and behold, would you believe it, I come to the mission headquarters of Tom Wolfe. And what do I see when I walk in? There is a spirit house. So I asked him, I said, Tom, you have a spirit house? He says, well, we're only renting the building. We don't have the authority to take it away. Oh, interesting. So that's where I realized that this belongs to the Thai culture. The other thing is that is so interesting is when you are in Bangkok, you're in front of the university, across from the university is like a courtyard with iron rods and so on. And when you look, there is a picture of some Buddhist kind of deity. And what do you see in front of it? Fruit, what else? Flowers, incense, water, all kinds of things. Pardon? Offerings, yes. That's right. Now stand with me. You're across the street and you just watch who is coming. There may be a university. There may be a high-rise building of Microsoft. And you see these people that come in their suits and so on. Where are they going? They're coming by. They light the candle. They light the incense. They do something. And then they go away again. And you say to yourself, wow, that's interesting. They're obviously educated. They're obviously successful. What are they doing? So I asked him, what are you doing? Oh, I'm earning merit. So that has something to do, again, with Buddhist worldview. Why do you need merit? Merit for what? What do Buddhists believe in? What is the most... Karma. What does karma mean?
Good or bad karma is...
Karma is that law of reincarnation. How does it work?
Depending upon what you do, you receive the reward or the punishment.
Okay. Now let's go to India for a moment. Okay, I have 6 more minutes. India. What is Indian society known for? They don't call it classes, they call it castes. You are right, okay? Castes. What is the highest caste? Brahmins. And then come all kinds of castes, and then come the no caste people, and then the untouchables. Now, each of these castes are linked to certain things you can or cannot do in society. Who are the ones that are the brainy ones, the teachers? They are obviously the Brahmins. The untouchables, they are the ones that take care of the dirt of society, and so on. There's another thing. Not only are there castes, in this world there is also a big difference that goes not only this way, but that goes this way. If you're a woman, you would not be in this room. Why? What are we doing here? We're teaching. And until 1844, there was no courses no schools for girls. Why? Because of the law of karma. See, it was your karma to come as a woman to this world. What is your job? Your job is to live within your karma, not to change your position. You accept it. Now, you earn merit, so to speak, by accepting your position. Now, you can do other things like sacrifices and so on. That gives you additional merit. So, because you need, if you want to get out of that, so that maybe next time when you come, you're a man, you can do certain things to make advancements. But the primary thing you have to do is you need to accept your position in society. So imagine when Mrs. Pule, the wife of a Hindu, decided that what they had read together as they were reading this tract that contained the Gospel of John, that showed them that there is a God who created all things and who loved all people and who treated women as real people. And somehow in her heart started the wish that she could share that with girls by educating them. Guess what happened? It was as scary as blacks wanting to go and vote a few decades ago. She was threatened, and the specific things how they treated her was they would take human feces and throw it at her. Because what does that mean? See, Hinduism and Brahmanism is a religion of purity. And this was the worst. That's why the untouchables, why are they untouchable? Because they are touching all the stuff that another Indian would not touch. It would make them impure. Do we have any impure laws in the scriptures? Any concerns about purity and impurity in the scriptures? Yes. We do. They leave us so cold. They are so, wow, why are they even worried about that? But when you are a missionary in India, suddenly all these things become genius, that God actually was addressing these issues in ways that are more or less irrelevant for our society. Mrs. Pule is the one that started the girls' education. Every woman that is educated owes Mrs. Pule her life and her dignity. She was the one who started. And her husband, Mahatma Pule, was the first Mahatma. Gandhi was the second one. Gandhi used the philosophy of Pule to advance his own thinking about what to do in his society. Okay? Now, what we're talking about is worldview. And so here's the point that we're trying to make before we let everybody out now. Okay? Ideas have consequences. Then we structure our societies to live in harmony with those ideas, and then something interesting happens. We forget the original ideas and we live automatically. We no longer have to think about it. So if I ask you today, why are you sitting on a chair and not on the floor? You would say to me, you're asking a stupid question. Everybody sits on a chair. Really? Does everybody sit on a chair? When you book a trip to go somewhere, what are you concerned about in the first night? Where will I stay? Will I have a bed? Why do you need a bed? What a stupid question. Everybody sleeps in the bed. Really? These refugee children that may come from some country, and those refugee families, you may be worried that every one of them has a bed. Some of you don't understand that making them sleep in different beds is actually a disservice to them because they are used to sleeping on the floor together. And by the way, that gives you more space. I rented out my apartment to somebody. I was very interested to see that the first thing they did is they brought in the bed. Where was the bed put? The bed was put into the living room, what was my living room before. It consisted of a stone. A stone. It was very heavy. It was a stone. Now we like to live on water, water bed and so on, on a stone. I couldn't understand it. I didn't say anything when I saw it. I just asked questions and then I said, there's something that I don't understand. But and some of you may be able to explain how this works. Cultures are very different. We have our assumptions about reality, and they become largely unconscious. We no longer have to think about spirits when we think about sickness, because automatically when somebody gets sick, we know what to do, and we go to the doctor. We have a whole system that is built on these assumptions. We believe, we know, and then we act. And then we have institutions like a doctor who knows how to treat it. We have institutions that train the doctor according to what we believe is true, the scientific worldview of the West. But the people that are coming to us, into this country as refugees, very often come from places where the assumptions about reality are very, very different. And therefore, even if they conform on the outside, on stage, they still have all the assumptions, the underbelly of culture, the backstage culture that they bring with them. Is it always a good thing that they lose those assumptions? How do you replace them? When you believe that when you leave the litter, that the spirits will come and inhabit the litter. So you will have all the spirits around you. So you keep everything clean. And now you are told, oh, but the spirits don't exist. Okay, so now you can leave everything. Sometimes when you try to change those beliefs and those worldviews, you know what happens? Unintended consequences. So you have to learn how to live with it. And sometimes these unintended consequences then lead to conflicts. Okay? So, when we come back, we will talk about how do you deal with cultural differences. Do you want to? Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it. Let's put our hands together.